Hayes Dominion Disc Brake Bleed Procedure. There are two procedures for bleeding Dominion disc brakes. Use the first for these scenarios: new brake system install, shortening or rerouting a hose, basic brake bleed. The second procedure is the two-stroke bleed process. Use this whenever you rebuild a caliper. Brake bleeding accomplishes two goals: replace old brake fluid with new, and eliminate air from the system. Both will improve performance and lever feel. Assemble these tools and PPE, and let's get started. Position the bike and handlebar so the handlebar is 45 degrees from horizontal. Then, position the master cylinder at 45 degrees, measuring from the bottom of the bar. This positions the bleed port at the highest point of the fluid reservoir. Remove the wheel. Remove the A4 kingpin or A2 T2 pad pin from the caliper. Remove the pads and sandwich spring from the caliper. Remove the caliper mount bolts. You'll need to manipulate the caliper when bleeding. Using the Hayes bleed block, tire lever, or the boxed end of a 10mm wrench, push the caliper pistons back into their bores until they're flush with the edge of the caliper. Be careful not to scratch the piston and make sure it is not misaligned in the bore. Insert the bleed block into the caliper. Insert the pad retention pin to hold the block in place. Use the Hayes bleed kit. Assemble two syringes, one for the master cylinder and one for the caliper. Fill a syringe 3/4 full of DOT 5.1 fluid. Eliminate all air from the syringe and close the hose clip. Pull a small vacuum to remove any air dissolved in the fluid. Make sure the caliper is slightly lower than the master cylinder and remove either caliper bleed screw using a T10 Torx driver and attach the syringe to the caliper bleeder. Fill the second syringe 1/4 full of DOT 5.1 fluid. Eliminate all air from the syringe and close the hose clip. Pull a small vacuum to remove any air dissolved in the fluid. Remove the master cylinder bleed screw using a T10 Torx driver and attach the syringe to the master cylinder bleeder. Open both syringe hose clips and pull a small vacuum at the caliper syringe to pull out any air that was introduced during installation of the syringe. Push all DOT 5.1 fluid from the caliper syringe to the master cylinder syringe, and then return it. Repeat this until no bubbles are seen. Push DOT 5.1 fluid from the caliper syringe to the master cylinder syringe while flicking the lever several times. Then return the fluid. Pull a slight vacuum at the master cylinder syringe while keeping the caliper syringe from moving. Release the vacuum, and then push fluid from the caliper syringe to the master cylinder syringe to remove air bubbles from the master cylinder. Repeat this until no air remains. Push all the DOT 5.1 fluid from the caliper syringe to the master cylinder syringe while flicking the lever several times, then return the fluid back. Pull a slight vacuum at the master cylinder to remove any remaining air bubbles. Add positive pressure by lightly depressing the plunger of the syringe. Lock the master cylinder syringe. Add slight positive pressure to the caliper syringe and lock it. Make sure the caliper is still lower than the master cylinder and remove the syringe from the caliper. Reinstall the bleed screw using a T10 Torx and torque it to 12 inch-pounds. Unlock the master cylinder syringe. Add slight positive pressure. Lock the syringe and remove it. Wait a few seconds for excess fluid to come out of the bleeder. Install the bleed screw using a T10 Torx and torque to 12 inch-pounds. Clean the master cylinder and caliper with isopropyl alcohol. Reinstall your pads and tighten the A4 kingpin or A2 T2 pad pin using a hex wrench. Torque to the proper specification. Reinstall the caliper and torque the bolts. Reinstall the wheel. Reposition the master cylinder and torque the clamp bolts. Check the brake for proper function by squeezing the lever. You have completed the Hayes Dominion brake bleed process. If you suspect air remains in the system due to lever feel, or if you are completely flushing the system, proceed to the two-stroke bleed process video. Please continue to our YouTube channel and hayesbicycle.com for more maintenance procedures and assembly instructions. Thank you for riding with Hayes.